Have you ever been listening to or reading a piece of Spanish content? So, a video, a podcast, reading an article, reading a story, and you think, okay, I'm exposing myself to Spanish, but is this enough? What if I want to take it further? How do I study this? What do I do with this? Well, you're very right to ask yourself that question because passive listening and reading don't automatically lead to active speaking. So if you've ever desired to have a system to turn what you're hearing or reading into Spanish that you can actually use, I have good news for you because today we're going to do exactly that. I am breaking down my 10-step method to turn the Spanish you consume into Spanish that you can use. But before we get into that, if you're new to me, te doy una gran bienvenida. My name is Erica Ray. I'm a former Spanish medical interpreter turned language teacher and coach, now living and loving life abroad here in Mexico. Over the past few years, I've had the immense privilege of helping hundreds of Spanish students go from mere Spanish learners to actual Spanish speakers. So if that's what you're looking to do, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so that you don't miss a video. One of the best things that you can do to learn Spanish in an enjoyable and efficient way and actually see your progress instead of just being lost in a bunch of bits and pieces is to focus on something. Now, there are a few different ways in which you can focus. One of them is to focus on a certain conversational or certain speaking topic that you want to bring to fulfillment. Short term, we're talking 1 or 2 weeks from now. So you have to break your larger goal into smaller ones. We talked about that in this video. But another way is to focus on a piece of content that you can listen to or read. Now, these two types of focuses can go hand in hand, especially if that piece of Spanish content is related to your current speaking focus. But you can also use this method to learn from any podcast, ebook, video that you want. So let's talk about this blueprint, the Spanish fluency blueprint, as I call it, that I've been sharing with Spanish learners for the past 6 years now. Thousands of learners have benefited from it. My personal students still go to it, reference it, use it because it just plain works. Now you can grab your free copy right now at ericaraylanguage.com/blueprint, but in case you need a bit more guidance, I'm going to break it down for you today in video format. So what are our objectives with this study plan, with this blueprint? Well, our first one is for you to be able to learn Spanish through materials that you enjoy. Because when you are learning through enjoyable and or relevant materials for you, this is going to make the Spanish stick so much better. It just makes the whole process more understandable, memorable, and useful. And our second objective is to use one piece of content to hit on all of the key language learning areas. We're talking listening, reading, writing, speaking, pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar. Now, before we get into the steps, we have to start by choosing a piece of Spanish content. How do we do that? Well, it needs to be comprehensible input, meaning Spanish that you can follow along with effort. So it can't be so easy that you're not learning anything new from it, but it can't be so hard that it's completely over your head. That's not going to be useful for what we're going to do today. It has to be at the Goldilocks level, just right. Now for these exercises, you're going to want to choose a piece of Spanish input for which you have both the audio and the text. So this could be a podcast or a story with a transcript, an audiobook with the ebook. Even videos with Spanish captions can work to a degree. If your audio is long, just work with short sections at a time. Or you can just extract one key section, and that can be your focus. Another thing to keep in mind is that you can make these steps as light or as detailed as you want. While they're not necessarily designed to be completed in one sitting, and you can certainly space this out over several days, you may be able to do several steps in one sitting, especially if you're working with a very short piece of audio. It is completely up to you how you want to work with this study plan. Let's get into the steps. Step number 1, listen to your audio with no transcript, no text, no captions, okay? No words. Just listen. You want to start with a small chunk of audio at a time. This could be 30 seconds, no more than a few minutes. It just depends on your level. And without any transcript, just play it several times and listen. Your goal is not to understand every single word here, but to grasp the overall meaning. Pay attention to the tone and context. Any familiar words or phrases. Who is speaking and what the topic is about? Visualize the scene. Can you picture it by just listening? If it's comprehensible for you, you should be able to do that. This step is one of the most effective ones to improve your decoding skills, so please don't skip it. In fact, even though you're free to move around the other steps in different orders, because although they are in a logical order, they're not fixed. You really can move them around. But this first one, this step one, is the only one that I really suggest that you keep as step number one, because this is the only chance that you have to work on your listening comprehension before you bring in the distraction of text. We don't have subtitles coming out of our speaking partner's mouth when we're in a real live conversation. Now, this is optional, but really powerful if you have time to do it, is that before you move into step two, try transcription. So choosing a short, even a shorter portion of your original short audio, choose a few sentences to try to transcribe just by hearing. Write down exactly what you feel like you hear, and then you'll get a chance to check yourself in step two when we do bring in the transcript. This trains your ear, and it also reveals what sounds or words you're missing. This is such a great way to boost your listening comprehension. One of our students, Colleen, found incredible value in doing this transcription. It boosted her listening comprehension tremendously. Now remember, you don't have to memorize what I'm saying or take vigorous notes. You can simply download your copy of the Spanish Fluency Blueprint at ericaraylanguage.com/blueprint. It walks you through every single step that I'm sharing today, and it's recently updated. So if you've downloaded it before, I suggest that you grab it again. As soon as you have, comment blueprint here in the comments below so I know you grabbed your copy. Step number two is to listen again while reading the transcript or looking at the text. You can just read along silently. So play that audio again and listen while you read. You'll probably understand so much more now because one, you'll see some cognates, so some words that look the same or similar, both in English and Spanish, that your ear may have missed the first time. Even though they look similar, they don't necessarily sound similar when you're just hearing it. So you'll be able to fill in some gaps that way. Also, you'll probably notice some words that you already knew, but you just missed them. It could be because of slurred speech or just connected speech where we run words together. So seeing everything written out helps to bridge that gap between what you heard and what you're now seeing. So go back to that transcript and go ahead and highlight, or if you're looking in something in digital format, maybe you'll want to write down some words or phrases that you are still unfamiliar with. There's been a lot of evidence to show that physically handwriting notes goes a long way to help with retention. I'm so bad about that. I don't handwrite very much anymore, but because of all of this research, it's a goal that I have. So you might want to set that as a goal for yourself as well. Now, you don't have to write down every single word that you don't know, but choose some key words. Maybe they appear more than once. They seem essential to understanding the main idea of the context, or they're phrases that you almost understand but not quite. Focus on usefulness, not volume, just what you really need for now. And a huge tip is to capture those words in context. So try to write down complete phrases or even complete sentences that contain the word that you are unfamiliar with. For example, let's say that you didn't know the verb llegar, to arrive, and your phrase says llegar al aeropuerto. Write down llegar al aeropuerto. Don't just write down llegar. Keep it with its context. It gives your brain some anchor. Even though it's just the one word you didn't know, writing down the full phrase gives your brain some anchor, and it helps you retain new meanings when you learn them later. If you're not sure what words to choose, you may ask yourself, would I want to use this word in a conversation? In step 4, it's time to deepen your understanding. So now it's time to go in and put meaning to what you discovered in step number 3. So uncover the meaning of those highlighted words or expressions or the ones that you wrote down. Surprisingly, when you look at your notes again, you may be able to go ahead and deduce some meanings from the context alone. If you happen to have an English translation of the material that you're working with, you can go ahead and do some comparison work. I did that a whole lot, especially during my initial stages. Or of course, you can just look up those words. You can use free online tools like Word Reference, Spanish Dict, even ChatGPT for some quick definitions and explanations. So the goal of this step is to increase your comprehension of what you're working with, because now you have learned new words and phrases. That's why it's so important to be working with that comprehensible input level, because you don't want 80% of it to be incomprehensible. That would be overwhelming. Step number 5 is to choose a grammar focus. So you've already started to identify some new vocabulary. Now it's time to zoom in on some grammar, which shouldn't be anything intimidating. It's simply how those words are put together. Now, if you're working with something that is for Spanish learners, and therefore perhaps it already has a grammar focus like past tense or reflexive verbs, then this is the time to go deeper on those explanations that may already be provided. I really like to create Spanish material that does have a focus so that my learners can zoom in on one thing at a time, and I can go ahead and provide those explanations for them. But if you're working on your own, then you're going to need to pick a focus. Maybe a verb form that repeats. Maybe you keep seeing verbs that end in era, like fuera, escribiera, comiera, and you're not very familiar with why the verbs would be ending that way. That could be your focus. Or maybe it's a sentence structure that you're not familiar with. Why is there an a when I say te presento a mi amiga? Why can't I just say te presento mi amiga? So keep it simple, keep it to one focus, and then if you're working on your own, it's time to pull out your investigating skills and look those things up. Tools like ChatGPT can help you put a name on what you've identified and then provide a simple explanation. And what this does is that it helps you become more aware when you see that pattern repeated throughout that text or even in other text in the future. Okay, so this paragraph is written in the subjunctive. That's why I'm seeing escribiera, comiera, and things like that. This is why it was used that way. Now you're alert to when you see that again. So you've honed in on one grammar point. You've learned new vocabulary. In step 6, we're going to do something that I call marinate in context. It's time to let everything that you've learned soak in. So go back to your original audio one more time and listen again. But now you're listening with all of this new information in mind. The new meanings of that vocabulary, your new alertness to the grammar that you've learned. It may seem repetitive to return to the same clip and listen again, because this is the 3rd step that has involved listening to it. But it's so important. And this step is so often overlooked. Many learners struggle with listening comprehension, not because they lack vocabulary, but because they haven't trained their ears to connect meaning with sound in real time. So that's why we are listening so many times. Now, as you listen and let everything marinate, you're not so focused anymore on meaning because you've already extracted so much meaning. But now you can listen more to the intonation, the rhythm, and the flow of the speaker. Notice pronunciation, tone, and emphasis that you may not have noticed before. So you're just marinating, you're soaking it all in. Don't underestimate this. Remember that a real conversation is 2 ways. It is not just you speaking, it is also you understanding. So don't ever underestimate how much you can work on your listening comprehension even as you study by yourself, and how crucial it is to do so. Step 7, we are going to read out loud. This is the point where we shift from preparation to practice. We start to produce the language. We're still not manipulating it or producing it independently, but we're speaking out loud. Reading out loud is one of the most powerful and underrated tools that you can have in your Spanish learning toolkit. This helps your pronunciation, rhythm, and fluency without the pressure of having to think of the word yourself. So you can do this in different ways. You can shadow, so you can throw on that audio again and read out loud at the same time as you're listening. Usually you're just a fraction of a second behind the speaker. You can listen, pause, repeat, really focusing on matching your pronunciation to that of the speakers. Or you can just read out loud on your own, focusing on clarity and flow. Reading fluency is a springboard to speaking fluency. It builds muscle memory. It helps you speak a whole lot even before you're able to formulate a lot of sentences on your own quickly. You can speak quickly by reading without having to think about it so much. So it's such a wonderful activity. In step 8, it's time to transform and personalize. So you start adapting and changing this piece of content to something that is more personal and usable for you. There are so many ways in which you can do this. I'm going to give you a few. You do not need to do them all. Choose 1 or 2. Choose what sounds appealing to you. But here are some different ways in which you can transform and personalize this material so that you can use it in real life. You can do sentence variations. This is one of my favorites. So you take a sentence from the transcript transcript and you change one or two things at a time. So this helps you get comfortable with the overall structure that you were already given in that sentence, but you're also making it your own. For example, if the original sentence is Amelia llega al aeropuerto y compra boletos, you might change the subject and therefore you need to change the verb. And so you say, yo llego al aeropuerto y compro boletos. You can go through a lot of different people and work on your verb conjugations. You can change the place and what Amelia did. Amelia llega a la tienda y compra galletas. You can change the verb of what Amelia did so that you're practicing with a different verb but in the same tense. Amelia llega al aeropuerto y come una manzana. You could just try combining a bunch of different substitutions. Have fun with this. Create as many combinations as you can, write a few down, because this step is so perfect for writing. You may have already started your writing earlier with transcription, but this is another opportunity. Write down some of those sentence variations. Another thing that you can do to personalize and transform your context is sight translation. So you can do this especially if you have the English translation, or you can even create an English translation of what you have. And then cover the Spanish transcript, look at the English only, and translate it verbally into Spanish. Then you can go back and forth and check your work. You can also make flashcards and do the same activity, going from English to Spanish, because that, even though it's more challenging than going from Spanish to English, this is the way that you are training your recall and your ability to transmit your English thoughts into Spanish. If you do it in reverse, from Spanish to English, all you're doing is testing your comprehension, which is not necessarily what we're going for here. Ultimately, you want to be preparing yourself to speak. Making your own flashcards is such a great thing to do because you can put full phrases, full sentences, like we talked about, the importance of keeping things in context. So not just one word, full sentences or full phrases. And that's a lot easier if you create them yourself, whether that be digital flashcards or physical flashcards. Another way to personalize and transform, test yourself on this, is to summarize the text. You can do this verbally or you can write it down. This is another great way to get writing in. Start small, aim for just 3 to 5 sentences. So what was happening in that content? What were the main actions or ideas? Can you include some new vocabulary or grammar that you learned? This helps with retention while also gently pushing you to create your own version of the input. And that's a skill that's going to be so useful in speech. So often when we're in a conversation, we're simply summarizing some happenings in our life. What he said and what she did, and I was thinking this, and it's just a summary. Maybe it took an hour for a situation to happen in our lives, but we don't take an hour to explain it to someone. And maybe a minute. So we do this summarization all the time. Get used to doing that in Spanish and it'll really help you out with your conversations. And then you can personalize it. You can write sentences that are true for you. Maybe you didn't go to the airport and buy tickets, but you went to the store and bought fruit for your family. So write that down. A lot of the sentence structure is the same, but you have to change it. Llegué a la tienda y compré fruta para mi familia. Step 9, my favorite. Use it in conversation. This is the moment where everything that you've done so far comes to life. You've listened, you've decoded, you've studied, you've practiced, but nothing will build your confidence like using your Spanish in a conversation with a real human being. And this is because real conversations challenge you in a way that no self-study and no writing exercises can ever do. They add a little bit of healthy pressure. You have to think on your feet. You have to adapt to unfamiliar responses or unexpected ones. You have to react to different speaking styles and personalities. And you have to express yourself even when it's not perfect, and even when you haven't had time to figure out exactly how to say it right. You need to express yourself anyway, and it's okay. And it can feel nerve-wracking at first, but this is exactly where your growth happens. You learn to be okay with imperfections. Mistakes are how you learn. So this is the reason why it's so important to work with a piece of content that you would like to speak about, that's interesting to you or that's relevant to you. If it's both interesting and relevant to you, that's fantastic, but at least has to be one or the other so that you don't have a problem when you get to this step and you need to speak about it. You can do this with a speaking partner, with a family member, with a teacher. You can do this in my conversation club, the Camino's Conversation Club, where we give you the content that you need, build in all of these steps for you so that you don't have to think about it yourself, and then give you those opportunities to connect and speak with other people and professional teachers about that topic every week, every day, if you would like, at 3 different levels. That's another option if you want to make life a bit easier on yourself. That's why I created it. And our final step number 10, is to reinforce and repeat. Once you've had your first real conversation on a certain topic, the goal is to keep building on it, having similar conversations in the upcoming days and weeks. And this lets you reuse the same vocabulary and sentence structures that you're learning in new and flexible ways. Let's say this week you were focused on preparing for a trip. And so you were learning about packing, flights, and travel planning. Well, you might continue your learning in the upcoming days and weeks by role-playing being at the airport, conversations you need to have there, or talking about trips that you've taken in the past, or your future plans for travel. You see, each conversation is bringing in new vocabulary and grammar, but also recycling a lot of what you've already learned and helping you build on it and reinforce it. And to do this, you can start the steps all over again with new but similar input. This is called narrow listening or narrow reading, where you're consuming several different pieces of content that focus on the same overall topic. But of course, they're all different. And there you have it, guys. That is the 10-step blueprint. What did you think about it? Again, it's not meant to be overwhelming. It's not meant to be done all in one day, but it's meant to give you structure and focus and the ability to see your progress like never before. So to summarize, you're gonna listen without the transcript. You're gonna listen with the transcript. You're going to extract key vocabulary and phrases, then deepen your understanding by clarifying the meaning of what you looked up, of that new vocabulary. You're gonna pick one grammar focus and dive into that. Let everything marinate in context by rewatching or re-listening. And now we move into practice. You're gonna read out loud. You're gonna transform and personalize that content. And then you're going to bring it to life. You're going to present it, use it in a conversation. And finally, you'll reinforce everything that you've learned by recycling and repeating, talking about the same topic in new ways. And then repeating the process with new but related input until you're ready to move on to something completely different. So go ahead and grab the written version of what we've just discussed, my Spanish Fluency Blueprint at ericurrylanguage.com/blueprint. Write blueprint here in the comments once you've grabbed your copy. Thousands of learners are using it right now to finally unlock their voice, and you can do it too. Why don't you put your blueprint to use right now by listening next to this real Spanish conversation? Nos vemos pronto.